In our first riding tip, I talked about being relaxed on the bike and regularly analysing yourself to see whether you can't relax a bit more. The idea being to take some weight off your wrists and not sit quite so ramrod straight on the bike. Ultimately, allowing your bike to move around a bit if it needs to in order to deal with something like a suddenly bumpy section of road. Well, after talking about that, it occurred to me that as a new biker and with a new bike, there's actually a couple of things worth doing in terms of setup of your motorbike before you even start riding it. And then once you do start, some further refinement of these elements will help provide the best possible ergonomic package for the most comfortable and enjoyable riding position for that bike. Most bikes these days will have some or all of the adjustability that I'm about to mention, and it's very much worth your trouble to try the full range of these options to find out what works best for you. Because we're all individuals of various sizes and shapes, I'm not going to prescribe what is right or wrong, just point out what might be worth a bit of a fiddle. Seat. Well, many bikes these days have an adjustable seat height. Put it down to its lowest to make sure that your feet are as solidly planted on the ground as possible when you come to a stop, and to benefit perhaps most from the maximum amount of wind protection that your bike might offer. Put it on its highest setting to give yourself as much leg room as possible and to give your knees the easiest possible time. Find the setting between these two extremes that suits you the best. Foot pegs as well, they're often adjustable. Move them forwards or backwards, sometimes even up and down, and see what feels best. The angle of the gear lever, well, that can also be changed. See what's more comfortable based on how your foot sits on the peg and what type of boot you wear. An adventure bike's lever is often set quite a bit higher than it is on a normal road bike because a big rigid boot is difficult to get under the lever that might otherwise be set for, say, a slinky pair of race boots. Handlebar, or even actually clip-ons, these tend to have some range of adjustability as well. A handlebar can change its dimensions forwards and backwards and up and down to a certain extent based on how you rotate it in its clamps. And if it's an adventure bike, for instance, and you spend a lot of time stood up when you're riding off-road, you might want to set it to be as comfortable as possible in that position rather than, say, setting it for when you're sat down if you don't do so much sitting down. Levers. Well, nearly every bike, no matter how cheap, has got some kind of span adjusting mechanism. Do what feels best. Some people prefer a wide span so that their hands are almost stretched out completely when they start to work the brake, and well, that will mean that you kind of operate the brake when your fingers are fully extended. Just on the barely curling your fingertips will the brake start to engage. Me, I prefer the levers to be a fair bit closer, but not too close, because I grew up in a time when brakes were rubbish basically, and faded frequently and badly. So you always wanted some extra space between the lever and your throttle so you didn't squash your fingers when the brakes got hot, or then you have to revert to a 4-finger grip. Also, talking about levers, and this can make a big difference for comfort, but not a lot of people seem to bother. It's dead simple. It's usually just one, or in this case, 2 bolts. Loosen them, and then you'll be able to rotate the whole assembly, which means you can adjust the angle of where the levers actually sit. On a naked, more upright riding position like this, or my MT-09, where I've also adjusted the levers, I rotated them down a bit, and then they more naturally sit where the line of my arm is. You want that line to extend as smoothly as possible to where you're going to operate the levers. If you've got a super bike though, and you ride it like it was meant to be ridden, which means at high speeds, and that means you'll be tucked in a lot, when you want to go for the brake or the clutch, your arm needs to be as straight as possible, which means because you've got a bend in it, you're in a racing tuck, the lever here actually needs to be further up, otherwise you've kind of got to get up to reach the lever. It's all about making the riding angle as natural as possible. I hope that made sense. It did to me. There you go. Just something obvious to think about, really. Easy to do, and yet too few of us do it. These little refinements can actually make quite a significant effect on the comfort levels that we experience on our bikes. I highly recommend you do some experimentation.